Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to Bookspin. And the book I'd like to talk about today is The Time Migration by Cixin, published in 2022. So this author is, of course, most well known for The Three-Body Problem and The Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, which is a great series. I really enjoyed it. I've read it twice. And this is a collection of his short stories. And it's a book that's pretty much unknown in the West because, as far as I can tell, this particular collection was only published in China. I picked it up while I was out there in China this summer and I was browsing a bookshop. I came across this book, published by Beijing United Publishing, and interestingly it's sold as a bilingual package. So it comes packaged with this book. This is the original Chinese text, and this is the English translation. And they come bundled together, which is an interesting publishing choice, I think. I wonder what was the marketing rationale behind that decision. But in any case, there are 7 stories in this particular collection. And you can still find them all in other books that have Western releases, just not as collected in this particular volume. So you can find these stories in 2 of his other collections, To Hold Up the Sky and The Wandering Earth. So, on to the stories. Like I said, there are 7 stories in here, so it's not a huge collection, but they are all a decent length, like novelette length. One of them might even qualify as a novella. Now, if you've read this author before, if you've read the Three-Body Problem series, you'll probably associate him with hard science fiction, big ideas, often mind-bending ideas, and storytelling that takes place on an epic scale. And he stays true to form with these elements in the stories in here. These tales are all epic in scope and typically have profound consequences, not just for the characters in the story, but for humanity as a whole and the fate of civilization. So in the title story, for instance, The Time Migration, which opens this collection, we follow a mass of people who decide to enter cryogenic hibernation for a period of 120 years in order to escape the problems of the world that they're living in their time. Basically, there's not enough resources to go around society. The world is too unstable. There's too much warfare. So they use this method to migrate into the future, hoping to find something better. So it's a sort of time travel in a way, something that this author has previously used in The Dark Forest and Death's End. But they find that this future Earth society that they wake up in to be very strange and unwelcoming. And they want to find something better. So they go back into hibernation, back into cryosleep, to be woken up at another time, even further into the future. But instead, what they find is, after however many 100 years it is, the social changes that have taken place are so bizarre, so alienating, and so profound. It's got to the point where humanity as we know it no longer even exists. Thanks to technological innovations, basically. Things like the complete digitalization of consciousness. So they basically have to keep jumping through time in order to find a new world to live in and to keep going forward into the future. So they sort of become refugees through time. This is quite a philosophical tale, I thought. It's quite thought-provoking, but it's also pretty nihilistic. So this was quite an interesting one, although I think it worked more of as a thought experiment than a proper story as the characters were pretty forgettable. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. There were some pretty fascinating sci-fi concepts throughout the whole collection. And while character building isn't this author's strong point, there are some pretty compelling stories in here and some pretty interesting ideas. So, for example, there's another story called Contraction, which takes the expansion of the universe following the Big Bang as its theme, and it posits a situation where this expansion finally finishes, or it comes to a halt, and the universe begins to contract, which sounds pretty abstract, but it's going to have profound and consequences and an unimaginable impact on life here on Earth. And the ending in this one is really memorable. It's quite mind-bending, and to me it feels quite reminiscent of the kind of twist endings that Frederick Brown liked to employ in his science fiction, but on a much grander scale. And there's another story in here called Mirror, which also takes inspiration from the Big Bang. In this case, the novum in this story concerns a quantum supercomputer that can simulate the whole universe, right from its inception in the Big Bang, all the way up to the evolution of life on Earth and the whole of human history up to the present day. I mean, talk about an ambitious idea. I don't honestly remember much of the plot details in this one. It did go over my head a little bit, some of these ideas, but I do remember being very impressed with this sci-fi concept. But probably my favourite story is another one called Curse 5.0, which is about a computer virus which is unimaginably powerful. So it's a near-future society. AI and the Internet of Things have really taken off. They are so ubiquitous, and everything is so interconnected. And this story imagines what might happen if we have this extremely resilient virus which is programmed to kill people, and it spreads throughout the network, and then it activates, and it kind of basically it turns into a non-stop homicidal mission, which sounds pretty far-fetched, and it is, but this was actually quite terrifying to read. It almost felt like a horror story in parts, and the way it's described, it feels scarily plausible. So I think that was a particularly impressive and memorable story, and probably my favourite from this collection. So there are a lot of interesting ideas in this volume, and although I did enjoy all of the stories, I will say that sometimes they suffered a little bit from the characters, the characterization. I found the characters to be often a little bit flat or unbelievable, or in some cases just unlikable, or obnoxious even. But it wasn't really, that's a minor complaint, I would say. They're still very good stories. But probably the thing I like least about this book, okay, there were aspects to the final story that left quite a bad taste in my mouth. So this story is called For the Benefit of Mankind, and its protagonist is a contract killer. So definitely not a sympathetic character. That's not the issue though. It's actually not a bad story, okay? It's just there's some really horrific violence and child abuse in this story that I found quite shocking and unpleasant to read. And although these scenes do make sense in terms of the way the plot goes. I think you could argue that it could have been done in a different way, in a less explicit way. I just wasn't expecting it. And so, yeah, I think this particular story definitely warrants a trigger warning. But yeah, it's still a good story. Just that I wasn't really prepared for that. On the whole, though, it is a decent collection. I did enjoy these stories. If you like SF with creative and mind-bending ideas, and if you enjoyed any of Liu Cixin's novels, you'll probably get on well with these stories. So I give The Time Migration 3.5 stars. And as this book isn't sold outside China as far as I know, consider picking up To Hold Up the Sky or The Wandering Earth, if this sounds like your kind of thing. So, the next book I'll be reviewing is this book, The Doors of His Face, The Lamps of His Mouth and Other Stories, which is a short story collection by Roger Zelazny, and it won the channel poll that I put up for my September TBR, Short Sci-Fi September, so look out for that soon. And also, remember the Peter F. Hamilton book giveaway is still live. It's still open until this Friday. I'll link that video down below in case you are interested in taking part. And that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.